Hello, and welcome to the Sleepy Mind. Tonight we are stepping into one of the oldest questions a human being can carry. Not a complicated question, not one that requires special knowledge or careful argument, but one that has a way of arriving quietly in the hours before sleep, when the day's noise has finally thinned enough to hear it. The question is simply this: what would it feel like to be at peace? Not for a moment, not in a place of particular beauty or quiet, but underneath everything, as a quality of being that belongs to you regardless of what the day contains. Inner peace is not what most of us imagine it to be. It is not stillness purchased through the removal of difficulty. It is not the absence of thought or feeling or the full weight of a complicated life. It is something far older and more available than any of that. Every tradition that has ever turned its attention inward, whether in a forest monastery or a desert cave or a small room in the middle of an ordinary city, has pointed toward the same thing. That beneath the movement of the mind, beneath the accumulation of preference and opinion, and the daily effort of managing a self through the world, there is something that was never disturbed. Something that does not require the circumstances to change before it can be rested in. This is not a dramatic discovery. That is, perhaps, what is most surprising about it. It does not arrive with fanfare. It tends to arrive in exactly the kind of moment you are in right now. Quiet. Still. With the day already behind you and no particular demand on what comes next. If these gentle journeys into sleep bring you something worth returning to, it would mean a great deal if you would like this video or subscribe to the Sleepy Mind. It helps more tired and curious people find their way here, one quiet evening at a time. But for now, there is nowhere to arrive. Let your body settle into whatever is holding it. Let your shoulders release just slightly, as if something you had been carrying all day has been set down at the door. Let your jaw soften. Let your hands rest open or closed, however they fall most naturally. And let your breath move at its own pace, without being asked to do anything other than continue. We are not going anywhere urgent tonight. We are simply going inward. Let's begin. It is worth pausing before anything else to notice what inner peace is not. Because the mind tends to arrive at this subject already carrying a picture, and the picture, more often than not, is the wrong one. It is not blankness. It is not the mind wiped clean of thought, or the life wiped clean of difficulty. It is not a mountain retreat or a particular quality of morning light, or anything that requires special conditions to produce. Those who have written most carefully about it, across thousands of years and from within traditions that had no knowledge of each other, have arrived at something surprisingly consistent. Inner peace is less like a destination and more like a quality of the ground beneath one's feet. It was always there. The walking simply covered it over. The phrase itself, inner peace, does not appear as a single term in the oldest Buddhist texts. What those texts describe instead are specific mental qualities, each with its own name and its own particular texture. Stillness, equanimity, non-reactivity, the absence of inner conflict. These are not synonyms for each other. They are more like facets, different angles from which a single quality becomes visible depending on where you stand. In Pali, the language of the earliest Buddhist writings, the word upekkha refers to equanimity, a balanced, undisturbed quality of mind that remains essentially steady in the face of both pleasant and unpleasant experience. It is considered one of the 4 Brahma Viharas, the divine abodes, the highest mental states a practitioner can cultivate. And the image used most often to describe it is not the stillness of a stone, but the stillness of a deeply rooted tree, one that moves with the wind, that bends, that is not rigid, but whose roots hold it to something that does not change. This distinction matters more than it might first appear. Peace that depends on nothing moving is not peace. It is suppression. The kind of peace the traditions point toward is something that can be inhabited in the middle of motion, in the middle of a life that continues to contain all the things that lives contain. The ancient Greek philosophical tradition had its own word for this quality. The school of Stoicism, founded in Athens around 300 years before the Common Era, used the word ataraxia to describe a state of tranquility and freedom from mental disturbance, which they considered the highest form of human happiness. It is important to note what ataraxia was not. It was not the absence of all feeling. It was not numbness or detachment. It was, very specifically, freedom from the unnecessary suffering caused by desires and fears about things outside one's control. The feelings remained. What fell away was the turmoil generated by resisting them. The Roman Stoic philosopher Seneca used a related Latin word, tranquillitas, and wrote about it with a directness that has lost none of its force across 2,000 years. He observed that people seeking peace tend to look for it in the wrong places, in travel, in new environments, in the accumulation of things, and he noted, with a kind of patient clarity, that wherever they went, they brought themselves with them. The condition they were trying to escape was not the place. It was the mind's orientation within any place. And that orientation, he argued, was the one thing a person had genuine authority over, if they chose to exercise it. Contemporary psychology has made a similar distinction, arriving at it through empirical research rather than philosophical argument. Researchers describe 2 types of inner peace. The first is peace as absence, meaning the removal of stress, conflict, or distress. The second is peace as presence, an active quality of stillness and contentment that does not depend on circumstances being favorable. Studies suggest that the second is the more stable and lasting of the two, and that it correlates more strongly with long-term well-being. This is not a surprising finding to anyone who has read Seneca, but it is a useful confirmation that what the ancients were pointing at was something real, something measurable, something that shows up in data, gathered in laboratories, as clearly as it shows up in letters written in the 1st century of the Common Era. The neuroscientist Richard Davidson, who has spent decades studying the brain activity of experienced meditators, found that practitioners show significantly higher baseline activity in the left prefrontal cortex, a region associated with positive affect and equanimity, even when not actively meditating. The practice had changed something structural. The peace was no longer an event that occurred during meditation. It had become, in some sense, the ordinary condition of the brain, available even in the middle of an ordinary day. In Sanskrit, the word shanti carries all of this within it: peace, stillness, the cessation of disturbance. It appears at the close of many Hindu and Buddhist prayers, spoken 3 times, once for body, once for speech, once for mind, as if the whole of the human instrument needed to be addressed individually before the piece could be considered complete. That gesture, the repetition, The careful acknowledgement of each layer suggests something about the depth at which peace must be found if it is to hold, not only in the thinking mind, not only in the words we use, but in the body itself, in the felt sense of being a living creature in a world it did not ask to enter and cannot fully control. And it is in the body, as it turns out, that one of the most reliable doors to that stillness can be found. Of all the doors that have ever been found into inner stillness, the breath is the oldest, the most widely documented, and the most immediately available. It is present in every tradition that has ever turned its serious attention toward the question of inner peace, not as a preliminary technique to be graduated beyond, but as a practice so complete in itself that lifetimes have been devoted to it without exhausting what it offers. In the Theravada Buddhist tradition, the foundational breath meditation practice is called anapanasati, a Pali word meaning mindfulness of breathing in and breathing out. The Buddha's instructions on this practice are preserved in a text called the Anapanasati Sutta, and they are remarkable for their precision and their depth. The practice is described in 16 stages, beginning with something as simple as noticing whether the breath is long or short, and deepening gradually through stages of physical calm and then mental calm towards states of profound stillness that the text describes as releasing the practitioner from attachment to experience itself. 16 stages, beginning with the length of a single breath. That starting point is worth sitting with for a moment. The instruction does not ask the practitioner to become someone different, or to acquire a new capacity, or to believe anything in particular. It asks only that they notice something they are already doing. The breath is already happening. The awareness is already present. The practice is simply the meeting of the two, and the sustained, patient returning to that meeting each time the mind wanders away. And the mind will wander. This is not a failure. It is the practice. The returning is what builds the capacity, the way a muscle builds not by staying contracted, but by the repeated movement of contracting and releasing. There is a physiological reason why this works, and it is worth knowing because it makes the practice feel less like a matter of belief and more like a matter of biology. When the breath is deliberately slowed, particularly when the exhalation is lengthened, the parasympathetic nervous system activates. This is the division of the autonomic nervous system that governs the body's rest and digest response, the counterpart to the stress response. Its activation reduces heart rate. It lowers blood pressure. It decreases circulating levels of cortisol, the primary stress hormone. The body, which was preparing to manage a threat, receives the signal that no threat is present, and it begins, gently and without instruction, to release. The vagus nerve plays a central role in this process. Running from the brainstem all the way down through the chest and abdomen, it is the longest nerve in the body and one of the most significant regulators of the body's internal state. Deep, slow breathing stimulates it directly, and its stimulation has cascading effects throughout the system. The heart rate softens, the gut relaxes, the facial muscles, which the vagus nerve also innervates, tend to loosen slightly, which is part of why people whose breathing has settled often look to an observer as though they have simply arrived somewhere easier. They have. Research has found that breathing at a rate of approximately 5 to 6 breaths per minute, which is considerably slower than the average adult's resting rate of 12 to 20 breaths, produces a state called cardiac coherence, in which heart rate variability reaches an optimal, regulated pattern. In this state, the heart and the nervous system move into a kind of synchronized rhythm that researchers associate with emotional regulation, mental clarity, and a particular quality of calm that is distinct from sleepiness. It is alertness without tension, presence without effort, the kind of state in which problems that seemed large tend to become, if not smaller, then more navigable. The ancient Indian tradition of pranayama, or breath regulation, arrived at similar understandings through a different route, developing dozens of named breathing techniques over centuries of careful observation, each one understood to produce specific effects on the body and mind. One technique, called nadi shodhana, or alternate nostril breathing, involves closing each nostril in turn and breathing through one at a time in a regular pattern. Studies have found that it reduces anxiety and improves measures of nervous system calm in controlled trials. The mechanism is not entirely understood, but the effect is consistent enough to have been documented independently across traditions separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years. There is something in the breath that the body has always known how to use. The traditions simply remembered to ask it. A study conducted at Stanford University found that a particular breathing pattern called cyclic sighing, involving a long inhale followed by a brief second inhale and a slow, extended exhale, was more effective at reducing anxiety than mindfulness meditation when the two were directly compared. The finding is not an argument against meditation. It is an acknowledgement that the breath is its own profound instrument with its own mechanisms, and that the simplest possible engagement with it, just breathing slowly and attentively for a few minutes, changes the body's inner environment in ways that the mind can feel almost immediately. The breath is available in every moment. It requires no equipment, no particular location, no special knowledge. It asks only attention. And in that asking, in the simplest possible act of returning awareness to the air moving in and moving out, something in the nervous system recognizes, as if remembering, that safety is possible, that stillness is available, that the present moment, which always contains the breath, is enough to rest in. And from that resting place, the body opens towards something deeper, a quality of stillness that is not only physiological, but interior, the kind that arises when the noise of the mind finally, for a moment, steps back. Silence is not empty. This is perhaps the first and most important correction the contemplative traditions make to the ordinary understanding. Most people, encountering extended silence for the first time, describe something that feels initially uncomfortable, even unsettling. The mind, accustomed to filling every gap with thought, commentary, or the ambient noise of daily life, does not immediately know what to do when those inputs are removed. It reaches for them. It generates them. It becomes, for a while, louder than it was in a noisy room. And then, given enough time, something shifts. The Desert Fathers, early Christian monks who withdrew into the Egyptian desert from around the 3rd century of the Common Era, devoted their lives to discovering what that shift produces. They developed a practice they called hesychia, a Greek word meaning stillness or quietude, and they understood it not as an external condition, but as an interior one. The desert was not the point. The desert was simply a place where the conditions for hesychia were somewhat easier to create. The stillness they were after was inner, and they pursued it with the same seriousness that a craftsperson pursues mastery in a trade. Many of them wrote that the interior silence they sought was harder to find than the exterior one, and more valuable once found. That the desert, for all its emptiness, was merely a classroom. The real territory was inward. In the Eastern Orthodox Christian tradition that grew from the Desert Fathers' work, hesychasm developed into a full contemplative system involving stillness of body, the quieting of discursive thought, and the cultivation of what practitioners described as the peace of God, a quality of presence that they experienced as something encountered rather than something manufactured. The distinction matters. They were not trying to produce a particular mental state by effort. They were trying to become quiet enough to receive something that was already available. The silence was not the goal. It was the condition under which the goal became accessible. The Soto Zen school of Buddhism expresses a similar understanding through a practice called shikantaza, which translates roughly as just sitting. In shikantaza, the practitioner sits in meditation without any object to focus, without a technique, without anything to achieve or measure. The practice is simply sitting, fully present, with nothing added and nothing subtracted. It is, in one sense, the most demanding form of meditation because there is no technique to fall back on, no method to follow, no progress to track. And it is, in another sense, the simplest, because it asks only what is already happening: a person, a breath, a moment, a room. The teacher Dogen, who brought this practice from China to Japan in the 13th century, described it as not a means to enlightenment, but as enlightenment itself, expressed in the act of sitting. The peace was not waiting at the end of the practice. It was present in the practice, if the practitioner could stop looking past it. Science has found its own language for what silence does. A study published in 2006 found that 2 minutes of silence was more physiologically relaxing than listening to music specifically chosen for its calming qualities, as measured by blood pressure, heart rate, and blood circulation. The music relaxed people. The silence relaxed them more. Something about the complete removal of auditory input allowed the body to settle in a way that even pleasant sound did not quite permit. Researchers studying the brain's response to quiet found something equally striking. Periods of silence, even brief ones, appear to prompt the growth of new cells in the hippocampus, the brain region most associated with memory and the integration of experience. Silence is not merely the absence of sound. It is, in some measurable sense, a condition under which the brain repairs and renews itself. The contemplatives who arranged their lives around it were not simply following a preference. They were, it turns out, following a need. In Japanese Zen culture, the concept of ma offers a further refinement. Ma refers to meaningful pause, the negative space between things, not only in music and visual art and architecture, but in time itself. The pause between notes is considered as important as the notes. The silence between words contains as much as the words. This is not a poetic idea. It is a perceptual instruction. Pay attention to what is between the things. That is where the texture lives. The Quaker tradition of Christianity arrived at a related understanding through entirely different means. In Quaker worship, the community gathers in complete silence until a member feels inwardly moved to speak. The silence is not considered an absence of the sacred, but its very medium. Presence is not produced by speaking. It is what remains when speaking stops. What the contemplatives of every tradition seem to agree on is this: silence has a quality that can be entered, inhabited, and rested in, not experienced as absence, experienced as presence, something that, once felt, is recognized as having been available all along, underneath everything, waiting with more patience than any person could sustain. And it is out of that silence, that deep, inhabited quiet, that the next quality arises. Not by being manufactured, but by being allowed. One of the quieter revolutions in how contemporary science thinks about the mind is the growing recognition that the mind does not live only in the brain. It lives in the body. It lives in the tension carried in the jaw for years without being noticed. It lives in the slight raising of the shoulders that becomes, over time, the ordinary resting position. It lives in the breath held a little shallow, a little high in the chest, in the way of someone who has learned to take up a little less space than they need. Inner peace, as it is understood by those who have pursued it most carefully, is not a purely mental state. It is embodied. It is held in the tissue of the body and accessed through it, not above or apart from it. The field of somatic psychology has documented this with increasing precision. Chronic tension held in the body, particularly in the jaw, the shoulders, and the diaphragm, is associated with persistent low-grade anxiety, even in people who are not consciously aware of distress. The body is holding, in its musculature, the record of what the mind has been through, and that holding generates a continuous low signal that the nervous system interprets as evidence of ongoing threat. The mind feels vaguely anxious. The jaw tightens further. The cycle continues at a level just below ordinary awareness, rarely examined and rarely interrupted, until someone or something intervenes. The work of physician Edmund Jacobson, who developed progressive muscle relaxation in the 1920s, demonstrated that deliberately tensing and then releasing each muscle group in the body produces a measurable reduction in anxiety. The sequence takes time, and it requires a quality of attentive presence, but it works. And the reason it works is not mysterious. When the body releases what it has been holding, it sends a signal upward through the nervous system that is the precise opposite of the signal of threat. The mind, receiving that signal, can begin to settle. The body leads. The mind follows. This is, in a sense, the reverse of the way most people imagine the relationship between thought and physical experience. But it is, according to both the traditions and the data, the direction in which peace most reliably travels. Research in embodied cognition, a branch of neuroscience and cognitive science, has gone further, demonstrating that mental states, including emotional ones, are not only generated in the brain, but are distributed throughout the body and influenced by posture, movement, and physical sensation. A person who adopts a relaxed, open posture with uncrossed limbs, softened hands, and shoulders that have dropped away from the ears measurably reduces self-reported anxiety within minutes. Not because they have thought differently about their situation, because they have arranged their body differently in it. The mind reads the body's position as data about the world's safety. Openness reads as safety. Safety reads as peace. In yoga philosophy, this understanding is built into the foundations of the practice. The concept of santosha, or contentment, one of the 5 personal observances that form part of yoga's ethical structure, is understood explicitly as a practice rather than a condition. Contentment is not something that happens to a person. It is something a person does through the body, through the breath, through the quality of attention brought to physical experience. The body is not the obstacle to peace. It is one of its most reliable teachers. In Theravada Buddhist practice, this teaching takes the form of kayanupassana, meaning contemplation of the body. By turning awareness toward physical sensations, observing them with precise, non-reactive attention, the practitioner builds what the tradition calls equanimity toward the full range of bodily experience. Nothing is resisted. Nothing is grasped. The sensation arises. It is observed. It passes. And in that simple process, repeated thousands of times over years of practice, the habitual flinching and reaching of the body gradually loosens its grip. The body that once braced against discomfort learns, slowly, to simply be present with it. And that learning turns out to extend well beyond the meditation hall. Research has confirmed additional dimensions of this. A single hour of gentle, restorative yoga has been found to significantly reduce cortisol levels in the bloodstream, suggesting that physical stillness has direct biochemical effects on the mind's capacity for peace. The body moved gently, held in positions that support release rather than effort, communicates something to the hormonal system that no act of will can quite replicate. Something that says, in the body's own language, that the emergency is over. Sleep itself is understood by many traditions as a form of this release, a nightly approximation of something the meditator works years to find while awake. The temporary suspension of the mind's grasping and resisting, the body returned to its own natural rhythm, consciousness moving into rest without being dragged there. Buddhist teachings sometimes describe deep, dreamless sleep as a brief glimpse of the liberated mind, not because the sleeping mind has achieved anything, but because it has, for a few hours, stopped preventing. The body knows, at some level, how to rest. What the traditions offer and what the science confirms is that this knowing can be invited into the waking hours too, gradually through patient practice, through the simple and repeated act of learning to carry a little less. There is a kind of suffering that has nothing to do with what is actually happening. It is the suffering generated not by the event itself, but by the insistence that the event should not be happening. The resistance, the internal argument with what is already the case. It is, by most accounts from those who have looked carefully at the architecture of the mind's distress, one of the most persistent and least recognized sources of inner turbulence. The Theravada Buddhist tradition has a word that points at this precisely. Dukkha is often translated as suffering, but the translation is imprecise enough to obscure something important. Dukkha describes more accurately a quality of friction or unsatisfactoriness, the particular discomfort that arises when the mind clings to what is pleasant or resists what is unpleasant. It is not the pain itself, it is the relationship with the pain. And the second noble truth in Buddhist teaching traces the cause of this friction to tanha, craving, or thirst, which includes not only the craving for pleasant things to continue, but the craving for unpleasant things to end. Both are forms of reaching. Both are, in the teaching's analysis, the source of the disturbance rather than its solution. The reaching adds a layer of suffering on top of whatever difficulty is already present. Remove the reaching, and what remains is only the difficulty itself, which turns out, in almost every case, to be more manageable than the difficulty plus the resistance to it. The Stoic philosophers arrived at the same understanding from a different direction. The entire Stoic practice of inner peace could be summarized, without much loss, as learning to distinguish between what is within one's control and what is not, and then withdrawing one's happiness from dependency on the latter. The Stoics did not counsel passivity. They were, many of them, active participants in the most demanding aspects of public life. What they cultivated was an interior position from which the events of that life could be met without being destabilized by them. Not because the events did not matter, but because the quality of one's own response was something that belonged entirely to oneself, regardless of what happened outside. The philosopher-emperor Marcus Aurelius, writing his private notes in what would become the Meditations, returned to this theme again and again with the persistence of someone who found it genuinely difficult and genuinely necessary. Things are what they are, he wrote in various formulations. It is not the thing that disturbs you, it is your judgment about the thing. That movement, from event to judgment to disturbance, is the site of practice. It is where the work happens. And noticing that movement, simply observing the gap between what occurs and what the mind adds to it, turns out to be one of the most accessible and most powerful forms of inner practice available to an ordinary person living an ordinary life. Contemporary psychology has confirmed these observations through a different method. Acceptance and commitment therapy, a widely researched psychotherapeutic approach, identifies what it calls experiential acceptance as a key mechanism of psychological change. Research consistently finds that accepting difficult thoughts and feelings, simply allowing them to be present without trying to suppress or eliminate them, reduces emotional distress more effectively than attempting to control or silence the inner experience. Thought suppression, the attempt to not think about something, tends to produce the opposite of its intended effect, increasing the frequency and intensity of the suppressed material. Acceptance allows it to move through, not because acceptance is resignation, but because it removes the additional energy being spent on resistance, which turns out to have been sustaining the very state it was trying to end. Psychologist Carl Rogers, one of the founders of humanistic psychology, described a paradox that he observed consistently over decades of clinical work. People change, including moving toward greater peace and well-being, most readily when they stop trying to change and begin simply accepting what they are. The acceptance is not the giving up of aspiration. It is the removing of the layer of self-rejection that sits between a person and the capacity for genuine movement. The person who accepts where they are, clearly and without additional self-judgment, finds themselves in a position from which movement is actually possible. The person who cannot accept where they are spends so much energy resisting the starting point that none remains for the journey. The concept of radical acceptance, developed by psychologist Marsha Linehan, extends this further. Accepting reality completely, including painful reality, does not change the circumstances, but fundamentally reduces the emotional suffering generated by them. The pain of a loss, accepted, is grief. The pain of a loss, resisted, is grief. plus the ongoing additional suffering of insisting it should not have happened. The first can be moved through. The second tends to become a permanent residence. What is being pointed at across these different traditions and disciplines is something that sounds almost too simple to be the answer to anything. Meeting what is present without adding resistance to it. And yet this simple gesture, practiced repeatedly and patiently, turns out to be the ground from which something even more fundamental can grow. A loosening of the grip on the one who has been doing all the resisting. A beginning of the inquiry into who exactly that is. There is a thread that runs through every major contemplative tradition's account of inner peace, and it is one that tends to surprise people when they encounter it for the first time. The thread is this: the most persistent source of inner disturbance is not the world and its difficulties, but the continuous effort of maintaining a self against that world. The exhausting, largely unconscious project of defending, justifying, and securing something called me. In Buddhist teaching, this project is addressed through the concept of anatta, or non-self. The teaching does not claim that persons do not exist. It points, more carefully, to the fact that what we call the self is not a fixed, permanent, or independently existing entity, but a flowing, continuously changing collection of processes, physical and mental, that have no stable core. The sense of being a unified, continuous self is, the teaching suggests, a construction. A very convincing one that it would be unkind to simply dismiss, but a construction nonetheless. And it is the grasping at that construction, the insistence that it be solid and permanent and safe, that generates a particular kind of suffering that no external improvement can reach. This is not, as it is sometimes misunderstood to be, a nihilistic claim. It is a liberating one, because if the self is not a fixed thing, then the territory that must be defended is not as large as it seemed. The siege can end. And what practitioners across traditions consistently report when this understanding moves from concept into lived experience is not a sense of loss, but something unexpected. Relief. A profound, almost physical relief at having been released from a project whose demands were never going to be fully satisfied. Psychological research has found its own language for related phenomena. The brain's default mode network, a set of regions that activates during mind-wandering and self-referential thought, when the mind is thinking about itself, its past, its future, its narrative, is consistently more active in people who report higher levels of anxiety and depression. It is less active in experienced meditators, both during practice and at rest. The reduction in self-referential processing correlates with reduced anxiety and increased feelings of calm. Something about the quieting of the self's ongoing narrative produces, in measurable terms, a state that resembles what the contemplatives describe as peace. Studies using brain imaging have found that experienced meditators show reduced activity in the medial prefrontal cortex, a region heavily involved in self-referential thinking, both during meditation and during ordinary rest. The practice changes the brain's default. The self's autobiography plays more quietly, and in the space opened by that quieting, something else becomes available. In the Sufi tradition of Islam, the concept of fana, meaning the annihilation or dissolution of the ego, describes a station on the path toward inner peace and union with the divine. It is understood not as a frightening disappearance, but as a form of deep release, the way a clenched fist held tight for so long that the holding has become unconscious, finally opens. What was being held is not lost. The hand itself remains, but the effort is over. The Sufi poets, writing about this state, consistently use the language of relief and homecoming rather than loss. The self, dissolved, turns out to have been the obstacle between the practitioner and the peace they had been seeking. The philosopher Derek Parfit arrived at similar conclusions through purely rational analysis, without any meditation practice. In his work on personal identity, he argued carefully that the boundaries of personal identity are far less fixed and certain than everyday experience suggests. We are more fluid, more continuous with others, more distributed across time than the ordinary sense of self implies. He wrote that when he first fully absorbed this understanding, it was for him a source of genuine liberation and calm. The world seemed to become larger. Other people seemed closer. The urgency attached to the project of the self's advancement and protection began quietly to lift. The practice of loving-kindness meditation, called metta in the Pali language, works at this boundary by a different method. The practitioner cultivates goodwill, beginning with themselves, then extending it outward in widening circles to loved ones, to neutral people, to difficult people, and finally, to all living beings everywhere. What this systematic widening produces over time is a felt sense of the self as less of a boundary and more of a meeting place. Not a fortress to be defended, but a field through which something warm and continuous passes. Multiple studies have found that regular metta practice increases positive affect, reduces self-criticism, and builds a more stable and less conditional sense of inner well-being. Not the spiky, comparative well-being of high self-esteem, which rises and falls with circumstances and comparisons, but something quieter and more reliably present. Something that does not require the world to confirm it in order to continue. And it is that quality, sturdy in its quietness, unspectacular in its constancy, that turns out to be among the closest things to lasting inner peace that practice of any kind produces. There is a quality that certain environments produce in the human nervous system that is difficult to manufacture and equally difficult to ignore once it has been felt. Standing at the edge of a forest in the early morning, or beside moving water, or in a field at the end of a long summer day, something in the body's alarm system quietly stands down. The mind, which spends a significant portion of its energy managing potential threats, finds very few of them here. And in that absence, something else becomes possible. Research has given this a name. Attention restoration theory, developed by psychologists Rachel and Stephen Kaplan, holds that natural environments restore a specific kind of mental capacity, the capacity for directed, voluntary attention that urban and task-focused environments steadily deplete. In nature, attention is not demanded in the hard, effortful way that managing traffic, navigating complex social situations, or working through a problem requires. Instead, it is drawn gently, effortlessly, toward things that offer no threat and make no demands. Moving water, the shifting of leaves, the quality of light in a particular hour of the day. This effortless engagement allows the directed attention system to rest and recover. And the state it recovers into resembles, in multiple measures, the calm that contemplative practice is working to cultivate. The two roots, nature and meditation, appear to arrive at something close to the same place. The Japanese government recognized this formally in 1982 when it added Shinrin-yoku, or forest bathing, to its national health program, following research demonstrating its measurable effects on stress hormones, immunity, blood pressure, and mood. Forest bathing is not hiking. It is not exercise in any conventional sense. It is slow, attentive walking through a natural environment, with the specific intention of receiving what the environment offers, rather than achieving anything. Studies measuring cortisol levels and natural killer cell activity in participants before and after forest bathing found consistent and significant reductions in physiological stress markers and improvements in immune function. The forest, it turned out, was doing something the body needed, and the body, given the opportunity, knew how to receive it. Part of this effect appears to be chemical. Trees, particularly conifers, release volatile organic compounds called phytoncides into the surrounding air. When inhaled, these compounds have been found to increase natural killer cell activity in the immune system and to reduce circulating levels of cortisol and adrenaline. Walking in a forest is, in a literal and measurable sense, a pharmacological event. The trees are, without any intention in the matter, altering the body's chemistry in the direction of calm. An ancient intuition confirmed in the end by instruments sensitive enough to measure it. In Taoist philosophy, this would not be a surprise. The Tao, roughly translated as the natural way or the natural order of things, is understood not as a concept, but as a presence, the underlying current through which all living things move most easily when they are in alignment with it. Harmony with the natural world is not considered a metaphor for inner peace in Taoist thought. It is considered its literal cause. The person who lives in alignment with natural rhythms, who follows the pace of the seasons, who does not force what is not yet ready to grow, finds something in that alignment that the striving mind cannot produce by effort. Nature does not try. It simply proceeds. And in observing that proceeding, closely and over time, the practitioner learns something about the quality of motion that does not fight itself. The concept of contemplative gardening in Zen Buddhist tradition translates this into daily practice. Tending a garden is understood not as a domestic task, but as a form of moving meditation, a space in which the practitioner encounters impermanence, the need for patient attention, and the particular satisfaction of working with what is alive rather than what is managed. The garden insists on the actual world. It insists on it with weather and with mud, and with the particular weight of something that grew overnight in a direction that was not planned for. Research on awe, the emotion generated by encountering something vast or exceeding one's current framework of understanding, supports this from another angle. Awe experiences, whether triggered by a mountain range, a night sky, or a natural phenomenon of scale, consistently reduce self-focused thinking, increase feelings of calm, and produce a sense of connection with something larger than oneself. The small, anxious self, encountering something genuinely vast, briefly stops insisting on its own centrality. And in that pause, something opens. Something that feels, to those who have described it, a great deal like relief. The Japanese concept of mono no aware, the pathos of things, offers a final note. It describes a quality of gentle, peaceful acknowledgement of the transience of beautiful things. The particular feeling of watching cherry blossoms fall, or autumn light moving across a wall at an angle it will not quite repeat. It is not grief. It is something softer than grief, a kind of grateful recognition that beauty passes and that the passing does not cancel the beauty. This is, in miniature, the same peace that the larger traditions find through longer roots. The peace of fully accepting impermanence, not as a loss, but as the very texture of being alive in a world that continues, with or without our insistence, to be as it is. There is something almost paradoxical about gratitude as a path to inner peace. It asks nothing to be different. It offers no argument against difficulty. It proposes instead that within whatever is present, something worth noticing is already available. And yet, of all the practices studied by researchers interested in human flourishing, the regular cultivation of gratitude is among the most consistently and significantly associated with lasting inner well-being. Psychologists Robert Emmons and Michael McCullough conducted some of the foundational research in this area, asking participants to write briefly each week about things they were grateful for. Those who did so, compared with participants who wrote about daily irritations or neutral events, reported significantly greater well-being, more positive emotions, fewer physical complaints, and more time spent exercising. The gratitude practice changed not only how people felt, but how they behaved, as though the shift in attention toward what was good generated energy for the ordinary acts of self-care. The inner state and the outer life were not separate. They were the same thing expressed in two registers simultaneously. In Theravada Buddhist practice, this quality is cultivated through a meditation called mudita, meaning appreciative joy or sympathetic joy. The practice involves deliberately generating happiness at the good fortune of others, an act that most people find unexpectedly difficult at first and unexpectedly liberating with continued practice. The difficulty is informative. It reveals how much of the mind's baseline orientation is comparative, measuring one's own position against others rather than simply receiving what is present. Mudita interrupts that comparison. It practices, in very small increments, the experience of another person's happiness as a source of one's own. Over time, practitioners describe something shifting in the baseline orientation of the mind itself, a gradual loosening of the habit of comparison, and a corresponding increase in a quality of contentment that does not depend on being ahead. The Stoics arrived at something adjacent through a different practice. They developed what has come to be called negative visualization, the deliberate imagining of the loss of things one currently has. This sounds at first like a recipe for anxiety. In practice, it functions almost oppositely. By contemplating impermanence, by allowing the mind to briefly inhabit a version of life without something it currently takes for granted, the ordinary becomes vivid. The morning cup of tea, the working body, the presence of someone one loves. These things, viewed against the imagined background of their absence, become briefly as extraordinary as they actually are. And the peace that follows from that recognition is not manufactured. It is simply the result of accurate seeing. In yoga philosophy, the concept of santosha, contentment, clarifies what this accurate seeing produces. Santosha is not satisfied mediocrity. It is not the suppression of aspiration or the acceptance of harm. It is a quality of receiving what is present with full appreciation, neither grasping for more than is here, nor pushing away what is. It is, the texts suggest, a practice, something one returns to again and again, rather than something one achieves and keeps. And it generates, those texts consistently note, a quality of inner peace that is not contingent on circumstances remaining favorable. Because it is not based on circumstances at all. It is based on a relationship with the present moment, whatever that moment contains. Neuroscience has found that the experience of gratitude activates brain regions associated with morality, fairness, and social bonding, producing a quiet form of satisfaction distinct from excitement or pleasure, the kind that settles rather than spikes, and that tends to linger rather than fade. Researchers have also found that individuals who regularly report feelings of gratitude and awe show lower levels of inflammatory markers in their bloodstream, suggesting that the quality of one's inner orientation has measurable effects on the body's physiological state. The mind and the body, it turns out, are not having separate experiences. They are having the same one, expressed in different languages, read by different instruments, arriving at the same fundamental condition. That the oldest human wisdom and the newest biological research should point in the same direction is not perhaps surprising. It suggests that what the traditions were cultivating was never merely belief. It was always, at some level, an understanding of how a living body most naturally comes to rest. Carrying an unresolved grievance is a particular kind of labor. It requires maintenance. It asks to be regularly revisited, rehearsed, and confirmed. The injury must be reviewed, the injustice restated, the case kept current, and the cost of this labor is not paid by the person who caused the harm. It is paid, daily and entirely, by the person carrying it. Research has confirmed this in physiological terms. Studies measuring cortisol levels and heart rate variability in people who describe themselves as holding significant grudges find elevated baseline stress markers compared to those who describe themselves as generally forgiving. The body is not neutral in the matter of what the mind rehearses. When the mind reviews an old injury, it regenerates the stress response associated with the original event, essentially repeating the injury on a neurological level, often multiple times a day, often for years or decades after the original event has ended. The brain, for this purpose, does not reliably distinguish between something happening now and something being remembered. The body responds to both with the same chemistry. Psychologist Fred Luskin, who has spent many years researching forgiveness at Stanford University, offers a definition that removes one common misunderstanding immediately. Forgiveness is not condoning harmful behavior. It is not reconciliation or trust or the erasure of what happened. It is, very specifically, the release of the personal suffering generated by continuing to carry resentment. It is a decision made not for the person who caused the harm, but for the person who has been harmed and who deserves to stop being harmed, including by their own memory. Luskin's research found that forgiveness is not a personality trait that some people have and others do not. It is a skill that can be taught, practiced, and strengthened the way any other capacity is developed, through patient and repeated effort. In Buddhist practice, loving-kindness meditation, metta, traditionally includes a stage of directing goodwill toward a difficult person, someone toward whom the practitioner feels resistance, resentment, or aversion. This is not sentimentality. It is one of the most demanding aspects of the practice, and teachers within the tradition are clear that it is not about generating false warmth or suppressing legitimate pain. It is about recognizing that the resentment being held is costing the practitioner something, and that the cost is not being shared by the person it is directed toward. They go about their lives. The practitioner sits with the burden. The loving-kindness practice asks, gently and repeatedly, whether the burden is one worth continuing to carry. It does not demand an answer. It simply continues asking, one breath at a time. The Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius approached forgiveness through a different frame, but arrived at a similar place. He wrote that people who behave badly do so out of ignorance, not malice. They harm others not because they have chosen evil, but because they do not understand the consequences of their actions clearly enough to choose otherwise. This is not an excuse, but it is a reframing that reduces the sense of personal affront. The harm was not a targeted message about one's own worth. It was a mistake made in the dark by someone who did not see clearly enough to do otherwise. And recognizing it as such, he observed, reduced his reactive anger, and supported the equanimity he was working to maintain throughout the extraordinarily difficult demands of his life. The Hawaiian practice of Ho'oponopono offers one of the most unusual and quietly affecting approaches to this territory. It involves directing 4 phrases inward as a form of internal clearing. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you. These phrases are not addressed to the person who caused harm. They are addressed to the inner field, to whatever in the practitioner is holding the wound, the resentment, the tightness. The practice does not require the involvement or even the knowledge of anyone else. It works entirely in the interior, and those who practice it consistently describe something loosening in the chest, in the jaw, in the held quality of the breath, that no argument or reasoning about the injustice could have reached. The body releases something it had been guarding, and in that release, a particular quality of spaciousness arrives that had not been available before. Research on forgiveness interventions consistently finds that the benefits extend well beyond emotional well-being. Forgiveness is associated with improved cardiovascular health, reduced chronic pain, and better immune function. The body that is no longer engaged in the ongoing labor of grievance has resources available for other things, for health, for presence, for the quiet, spacious quality of a life that is not, in some portion, permanently occupied by the past. What the research describes and what the traditions have always taught converge here, as they do so often, on the same essential understanding. That peace is not found by winning the argument. It is found by setting it down. There is a quiet arithmetic to the relationship between what a person owns and what owns them in return. Each object in a life requires something: a place, occasional attention, the mental energy of knowing it is there, of deciding whether to keep it, whether it is in the right place, whether it is being used well or wasted. Multiply this across the accumulated objects of an ordinary modern life, and the total is not negligible. It is, according to a growing body of research, a significant and largely invisible drain on the inner resources available for peace. A study from Princeton University found that visual clutter in one's environment competes for attention in a way that increases cortisol and reduces the capacity for calm, focused presence. even when the individual is not consciously attending to the clutter. The objects do not have to be noticed to have an effect. Their presence in the visual field registers at a level below deliberate awareness and exerts a continuous low-level demand on the nervous system. Tidying a space is not, from this perspective, merely a domestic chore. It is a form of nervous system care. In Buddhist teaching, the concept of aparigraha, or non-grasping, appears not only as a moral guideline, but as a practical description of the way suffering is generated. Clinging to things, to ideas, to relationships, to identities, to the particular arrangement of one's current life, produces a kind of held breath quality in the mind. A bracing against change. A continuous expenditure of energy in the direction of keeping things the same. The practice of non-grasping does not require giving things away, though many practitioners choose to. It requires a lighter relationship with what one has, a holding of it that knows, at the same time, that it will pass. And in that knowing, something releases that had been quietly contracting. Research on what psychologists call decision fatigue has found that the number of choices a person must make in a given day depletes mental resources in a measurable way, leaving less capacity for considered, peaceful action by the end of the day. Simplifying the choices built into a life, including choices about objects, routines, and the structure of one's day, reduces this drain. The mental energy that was going to the management of complexity becomes available for something else, for presence, for attention, for the kind of unhurried awareness that most people recognize as one of the qualities of inner peace and simultaneously feel they do not have time for. The simplicity creates the time, or rather, it reveals the time that was already there, hidden underneath the complexity. The Japanese aesthetic philosophy of wabi-sabi offers a different angle on simplicity. It finds beauty not in the perfect, the complete, or the enduring, but in the imperfect, the incomplete, and the impermanent. A tea bowl with an uneven glaze, a garden where leaves have fallen and have not been entirely removed, a room where the afternoon light reveals the grain of old wood that has lived a long time and carries that living in its surface. Wabi-sabi is not a style. It is a form of attention that has made peace with transience, that does not require the world to hold still or remain perfect in order to be appreciated. And in that acceptance, there is a quality of settled ease that the restless striving for perfection cannot reach, because perfection, by definition, is always slightly ahead of wherever one is. Henry David Thoreau, who spent 2 years living with radical simplicity at Walden Pond in the 1840s, documented what he found there with a precision that time has not softened. He described a quality of attention that became available when the accumulation of the unnecessary was removed. Not the grand attention of dramatic events, but the small, continuous, astonished attention of a person to whom an ordinary morning has become extraordinary simply because it has not been cluttered away. The call of a bird heard fully, the particular quality of ice forming on a pond, the way an afternoon can contain an entire world if the world is small enough and the attention steady enough. He found that simplicity did not diminish life. It clarified it, stripped it to what was actually there, which turned out to be, in his account, more than enough. That experience of enough is perhaps the most important idea in this cluster, and, in some ways, in this entire journey. Research on the psychology of sufficiency finds that the feeling of having enough is not primarily determined by how much one has. It is determined by one's orientation toward what is present. Two people with identical material circumstances can inhabit completely different inner landscapes, depending on whether their attention runs habitually toward what is lacking or toward what is already here. And the practice of directing attention toward what is here, gently, persistently, without force, turns out to be one of the most direct routes to the quality that all the traditions are pointing at from their different directions. Not the excitement of arrival, not the relief of problems solved, simply the settled, continuous, quietly astonished recognition that this moment, with everything it contains and everything it lacks, is already enough to rest inside. That this breath, this room, this gradual loosening of the day is not the preparation for something else. It is, itself, already the destination. As we come gently to the end of this evening's journey, let the whole of it settle for a moment before it fades. We began tonight by asking what inner peace actually is, and found that it is older and more available than the picture most of us carry. We traced it through the breath, that oldest and most patient of teachers, always present, always willing to be returned to. We sat inside silence and found it full rather than empty, a presence rather than an absence, a medium through which something essential becomes audible again. We recognize the body not as an obstacle to stillness, but as one of its most reliable doorways, holding what the mind has been through and releasing it, slowly, when given the conditions to do so. We spent time with acceptance and with what becomes available when the mind stops adding resistance to what is already the case. We looked at the self, that tireless project, and found that the lightest relationship with it tends to produce the most peace. We walked through forests and sat beside water and let the natural world do what it has always done quietly and without announcement. Remind the nervous system that it is not, in fact, alone in the universe or threatened by it. We practiced gratitude, not as performance, but as attention, as accurate seeing. We set down some of what we had been carrying from the past, and we considered simplicity not as deprivation, but as clarification, the gentle removal of what obscures rather than what sustains. What runs underneath all of it, like water beneath stone, is a single recognition that every tradition eventually arrives at, and that the research, from its different angle, consistently confirms. That peace is not a condition waiting to be achieved somewhere further along. It is a quality of attention available in the present moment, in this breath, in this body, in this ordinary and sufficient evening. It was never very far. It simply required a certain quality of stillness in order to be noticed. If this journey brought you something worth returning to, it would mean a great deal to leave a like or subscribe to The Sleepy Mind. This channel exists because of the people who find something in these slow, unhurried evenings together, and every small act of support helps more tired and curious people find their way here. If sleep has not quite arrived yet, there is another gentle door waiting for you on the screen whenever you are ready for it. But if your eyes are heavy now, let them close. Let the evening's words dissolve the way breath dissolves into the air, not held, not stored, simply offered and released. Let your shoulders settle. Let your jaw unclench from whatever it found to hold today. Let your hands rest exactly where they are, open or closed, without needing to grip anything at all. The day is complete. Whatever it contained, it belongs to the past now, and the past is very quiet. All that remains is the breath, slow and continuous, and entirely your own, carrying you, as it always has, from one moment into the next, without effort and without end. Let it carry you now. Sleep well and good night.